Hi, my name is Niambi Echoes, and I just wanted to share with you a little bit about birth and our new cohorts that we're about to start. I wanted to give you just a little bit in case this is your first time seeing me or hearing me or even meeting me. I wanted to give you just a little bit of information about me. What was the impetus for me starting these cohorts? What is our mission? What is our methodology and why, what is my why? And so I thought the best way to do this was to share a really quick um, PowerPoint presentation and to just share with you a little bit about me and about our cohorts and how this will go over this 9-month period. So first, before I get into birth, I want to give you a little bit about me. I am a native Chicagoan. I was born on the south side of Chicago and I came through two wonderful human beings, Frank and Eunice Clark. Both of them have transitioned into the spirit realm, but my dad transitioned in 2004 and my mom just transitioned earlier this year in January. And the two of them were native Alabamians. They both migrated to Chicago, like many other families, in the late 50s, 1950s to Chicago, early 50s, actually, and raised their family there because it was better opportunities and jobs. We grew up in a house on the south side of Chicago. This is my childhood house. I grew up there and spent all of my childhood in the Inglewood neighborhood, which has transitioned quite a bit since I was a little kid. That's me on the side. I had 6 other siblings. My youngest brother was not born at the time of this Brady Bunch photo, but I have 3 older siblings and 3 younger siblings. My oldest brother, Ronnie, has transitioned as well, but we grew up fairly middle class neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. My father was a cross country truck driver, and that's what he did the entirety of my life. That's how he raised us. And my mother was a stay at home mom. And through the sacrifices that both of them made, were able to send all of us through parochial or private school, Catholic school. So I didn't go to public school, neither did any of my siblings until college. We all went to um, uh, private school. And so that was quite a feat for a Black family on the south side of Chicago to be able to send all of their children on one income. But that was who my father was. And he had such a strong work acumen that I realized after his death that he had been working since he was 8 years old. And a lot of the backstory of my grandfather and my father's childhood was something that he never spoke of. He never, when we would ask him questions, he wouldn't really give us the intel because I think some of it was just too painful for him to relive. So he never spoke about details about his father or some of the more intimate details of his childhood. What I did come to understand was that his dad, my grandfather Alexander, was a farmer, and he was a hardworking man. And he was working when my dad was 8 years old one day. Um, if you know anything about rural Alabama, there were towns, probably still are, in fact, a few unspoken but sundown towns. And those towns are specifically, everybody understood what they meant. And that meant that if you were caught in a sundown town after sundown and you were not white, then all bets were off. So unfortunately, my grandfather, who was a farmer, was traveling through a sundown town trying to make it home one evening when my dad was about 8 years old. And his um, his car got a flat tire. And so, needless to say, my grandfather never made it home. And from that point on, my father had to become the breadwinner of the family. So he quit school. He was in probably around the third grade, and he had to work to provide for his mother and his two younger brothers, my uncles. And my dad never spoke of it. He never talked about his dad. He never talked about what happened to his father. Um, Unfortunately, during that time, it was commonplace for things to happen. So it was just trauma upon trauma. And so him and my mom, when they got married, they decided to move north to look for better work, to see if they could make a way for their family, as did many families. Moved to Chicago and Missouri and Arkansas and other places um, to get out of rural South. But what I also realized that even though my dad didn't speak of it, I am made up of the material in which he literally, him and my mom, comprised my DNA. And so my cells are made up of their cells. And even though they both have transitioned, when I look in the mirror, the older I get, I see both of them. I see their faces, I see their body parts, I feel them. Even sound like them sometimes in the things that I say and the things that I do. So I know that they're still a part of me. And what I also realized that even though his trauma and both my parents' trauma was sometimes unspoken, it was still there. And the past isn't the past until you get past it. And as a society, we're not past it. My story was similar to many other people and their stories. What I also thought about as I got older was not only the trauma that my family experienced, but also the trauma that those families and those little kids that witnessed all kinds of heinous acts, those that carry the remnants of um, those seeds of hatred and all of those things, that even though I didn't experience it, it's still a part of me, as it is a part of many people and many of you that are watching that same trauma on one side or the other is still there. And the past is in the past until we get past it. And we ain't past it, y'all. And that's the reason for birth. One of the reasons for birth. Well, part of my healing journey happened after high school. I went to college, and as a young woman, my first instances of head-on racism was when I was at college and going to a predominantly white university. I began to really experience some of the trauma of racism first up, because when I was in Chicago, I grew up in a very segregated neighborhood. But I didn't see it as being a bad thing because I was around people who looked like me, who acted like me, who reflected me. So it felt more like a safe space to be. As I went out into the world, I realized that there were some things that started bubbling up inside of me that I had to address. Not only racism, but just being a woman in a society that doesn't that necessarily didn't support not only being a woman but also being a Black woman. And so I did a lot of my healing work, continue to do my healing work, but I did a lot of healing work and intentionally around healing the wounds of being a Black woman in a predominantly white society. And so through the birth of that, what became, I wrote a book called Project Butterfly, and there's 3 editions of that book. I wrote it 20 years ago. That book inspired a sleepaway camp, a 7-day sleepaway camp for girls, for Black girls, called Camp Butterfly. That book also inspired an after-school program that is still in place, that is still in place in many of Chicago schools, but it also became the foundational information for rites of passage groups and other empowering groups for girls and women. I wrote a second book called Inspiring the Souls of Our Girls, 10 Ways to Effectively Support Teenage Girls. And that book was a reflection of all of the work that I had done over the years with girls through camp and through my programs. And it was written to support those service providers that actually work with girls. Through Camp Butterfly and Project Butterfly, I've literally supported thousands of women and girls from across the country, and through our camp, through our after school programs, through different workshops and retreats and one-on-one facilitation, and just all kinds of methods that I have been blessed to be able to say that I have supported the healing of a lot of women. I still continue that healing with a program called Metamorphosize, which is a 10-week program specifically for women of African descent. The Butterfly, Camp Butterfly, has continued on, and I've kind of handed it off to a woman who also volunteered for Camp Butterfly, and it is now evolved into the Butterfly Movement, which is hosted in Oakland, California, and Project Butterfly, which has become a training facility, a training mechanism for women who work with girls, has also been transitioned to another woman who is leading that charge. So I'm not doing any more direct service in that, working with young people, but I've certainly set the foundation, and it's been over 20 years. In fact, we're celebrating our 20th year anniversary for all of this in 2024. Since then, I have kind of evolved into not only, or expanded from not only supporting women of African descent or Black women and girls, but just humanity as a whole. And so I started my own company called Cross Cultural Agility. And since 2018, have been supporting, doing staff trainings and supporting, being a support and consultant for many in the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion realm, adding my version of DEI, which is heavily vested in spirituality, because I think that's part of the conversation that is missing. And so in that, I wrote a book. I think that's my answer to just about everything, is that if I don't see it, just write a book about it. And so I wrote a book called, back in 2018, called What Color Is Your Soul? Healing the Illusion of Our Separateness. Because I thought that there was a part of the conversation that we just wasn't talking about. And so I wanted to create something, and I created the book. And it went out right on the heels of COVID 2020 and George Floyd's murder in 2019. So I think the book is very timely, but it came during a time when we really have been grappling with our and highlighting our cultural differences. And so I also started during this time an online school called Earth Purpose Institute for Divine Understanding, because I wanted to have a place to hold all of this information that was coming through, but also a space for people to get this learning, a different perspective. So my perspective is not one of just going through the social justice lens, but actually through more of a compassionate advocacy lens. And it's not what I've heard people say many times. Anytime you add spirituality to the conversation, you're spiritually bypassing. And to me, that's so not true. I think that the part of the reason that we can't get to healing and solution is because we don't bring in our spirituality. We may bring in a religion, but religion is very different than spirituality. Spirituality is who we are, spirit. And so I think that when we don't bring the wholeness of who we are, we miss out on a very big part of who we are in being able to solve the problem. So to me, bringing in spirituality is not just skipping over all of the pain and the trauma, but to me, it's equipping us, putting on our spiritual hazmat suits so that we can effectively deal with the trauma. So I have a different approach to it. And so, the book is out there and many people have been supported through it because it gives a different light brings a different lens to the conversation. And so after I wrote that book, it seems like I stayed book pregnant all the time. But I'm pregnant with another book, actually 2 books. But this one, the title is Birth, and that's bringing inner radiance towards healing. And it really is about activating a brand new relationship between women of different cultures, because I don't think we've never had the connection because of all the trauma that sits in the middle. So it's time for us to really birth something new. And so this course is a reflection of the book. This will basically, I'll be sharing a lot of the content of the book through this 9-month process of birthing. For me, what's really important, and you can see reflected in my previous work, that I'm all about the butterflies. And the reason that I love butterflies so much is because when a caterpillar is in its full caterpillar state, nobody says, oh, that's a beautiful butterfly gonna be. That's gonna be a wonderful butterfly when it finishes. It's fully vested in being a caterpillar, and that's all we see. Once it goes through its transition, or that's transformation, the transformation is so complete that we don't call it a flying caterpillar. We literally call it it's a new creature. It becomes a butterfly. And so what I love about this analogy, and I use it in all of my work, is that I think it is important because the whole job of a caterpillar is to gather information. It really is just to eat the whole time. That's the life of a caterpillar, is just, there's even a little kid's book called The Hungry Caterpillar, because that's really all a caterpillar does, is eat and eat and eat, because it needs all of that fuel in order for it to do the next phase of its life. And so for me, I believe that for many of us, we are, from the time we get here, we're collecting information, we're collecting stories, we're collecting identities, we're collecting all of those things that later in our lives, we realize that there are things that are just not working. For many of us, sometimes we go and we think, okay, I've got to find myself. I need to find the truth of who I am. I feel like my past is keeping me from the future that I want to live. So most of us find ourselves or search for ourselves in some way. We know that who we came here to be on this planet, we're not living up to that in some way or another. So we want to go through some kinds of transformation. Same thing with the caterpillar. When a caterpillar feels that inner calling, what it does is that it now spins its chrysalis, which becomes its safe space in order for it to do its work. And the same thing for us. We get a calling, we see what's happening in the world, we see how we're living in the world, and we just know that there is a better version of us somewhere. We just don't seem to have access to it. And so what that caterpillar does is it spins this chrysalis, and the only thing that it has to do is surrender. That's it. It surrenders to the point of liquefaction. That's how deep that surrender is. And what I love about that is that it at least that I'm not aware of, there's no like magical butterfly fairy that goes around and taps every chrysalis and changes that caterpillar into a butterfly. What happens is that caterpillar surrenders to the point of liquefaction, and every experience of that caterpillar from a cellular level is transformed, recalibrated, recycled. All of that is reconstituted in a way to form the butterfly. No extra ingredients added or needed. And it's the same thing with us, that we are a product of everything, every story, every experience, everything that we've ever experienced. But in order for us to transform, we don't get a lobotomy or a brain transplant so that we can become a new creature, at least not yet in this society. But everything, we have to have a transformation of thought and mind. And what I love about the analogy, the piece that is really important are two things. One, that if we don't transform that information, whatever is not transformed, we transfer. In other words, if we don't heal the trauma, if we don't heal those things, remember, I am made up cellularly of my mother and my father. I pass that down through the generations to my son and to future generations. That's why it's important for us to heal. The second thing is that in order for the only thing that a caterpillar needs is a safe place to do its work. That's all. Because if you try to help it out of its chrysalis when it's coming out, you pretty much doomed it, because that struggle is necessary to build the blood in the wings so that it can actually fly. So our struggle is necessary. This cohort is not to heal any woman. I'm not here to fix anybody. What we are creating is a safe place for women to do their work, a safe place. And that space is a space, I've never seen any good work done through shame and blame and fear. You can't do it's pretty much under duress. And that's why, to me, some of the models that are out there and some of the work that is being done, if it is based on fear and guilt and shame, it doesn't stick, because all fear, shame, and guilt does is make you feel bad. And it doesn't promote the healing, in a good way. And so I would rather create a safe space for women to do the work, to be able to make the changes that they want to make, to understand, and not only understand it, but understand it in a way that is meaningful. And so that's the whole point, really, of birth, is to create a safe space so that women can do the work that they need to do, even in an actual birth. When a woman is giving birth to a baby, she does not need anything except for support. Women have been given birth since the beginning of time. And my job as a facilitator, along with my co-facilitator, sister friend Marie, is to create the safety, create a safe container for us to really go in and provide the environment for change to happen, for transformation to happen. So I think we as women, that what really excites me about birth is that we have an opportunity to really disassemble, just like that caterpillar, reformat, reconstitute, recalibrate our stories and our narratives that are embedded not only within our society, but within us. And we have the opportunity to rebirth the world. So we're bringing that inner radiance towards the healing of not only ourselves, but the healing of humanity, healing of the world, healing of our families. But we have to have a safe space in order to be able to navigate that. So that's what really these cohorts are about. It's about having a safe place for us to give birth. And real quickly, I want to run through what the cohorts, or what is the birth process really about. So the first phase of birth is phase one is our pregnancy. So we're literally going to spend 9 months in virtual cohorts. And before COVID, I didn't know anything about Zoom, but I have become I wish I had gotten stock in Zoom because I love the byproduct of it. I miss doing work in person, but I also love the fact that I can do work with women all across the planet, and that we can be together in a space. And so because I've been on Zoom so much, I've learned also how to translate some of those things around safety and creating a safe space to the virtual world. And so in the first phase of pregnancy, we'll be together for 9 months, twice a month. I'm sorry, not twice a week, twice a month for 9 months. Phase 2 will be an active labor, and that active labor includes a 4-day overnight in-person retreat. Now, depending on who's in the cohort and where we are, we'll decide as a cohort where that 4-day overnight retreat is so that it is accessible to all the women that are part of that cohort. So each cohort might have a different destination, but we'll be together for 4 days. And that's not just to sip, lemonade on the side of the pool. We're going to actually be in active labor. So it is really that part of the process where we actually get to meet each other in person, but also to do some work together in person. By then, after 9 months, we will have known each other, we will understand each other, and we will be able to hold space for each other to do the next phase of our work together. Then phase 3 is postpartum. We'll continue our process together. So this isn't a one and done, but this is a continued process where we'll stay together on in a secured online platform, similar to Facebook, but not Facebook. I'm not a really big fan of Facebook. I'm on Facebook, but I'd rather have a space where we can control kind of the narrative and really be together. So in actuality, what we're going to do is when you sign up, we will share that platform with you. And so once you become a part of the cohorts, you will automatically have access to this shared platform. But the only way that you can get into this sacred space is to be a part of one of the birth cohorts. And the reason for that is that we want women who will be learning new tools, new language. It's like having a room full of butterflies versus, and then just letting caterpillars in. They're not going to understand what we're doing. So if you go through the process, then of course, then you're part of the secured online platform. But it's only for those that have gone through this phase. And so let me share with you quickly what those phases are. So the first phase is, of course, conception, which is the hurt. And during that first phase, we're going to be addressing the hurt or the perceived initial offenses. And some of those topics are invisible womanhood and ain't I a woman? And ain't you tired too? And so understanding some of the complexity of just being a woman in this society. We'll also talk about triggers and the Karen, the angry Black woman, and other archetypes that have shown up in our society. And we need to address them. Mining our ancestral roots. So we'll look at those genetic mutations and susceptibility. And then we'll also examine 3 lies and a truth. And I won't say anything else about that, but there are 3 lies and a truth that we are all that are prevalent within our society that we're going to explore. And so then we move on into, after conception, we move into the first trimester, which is the harm. And addressing the harm, which is the perceived wound. And so some of those topics are the woman in the deep, dark shadows, which is angry, scared, guilty, and enraged. We'll talk about the father, not only our physical father, but in a patriarchal society, what the father represents. And so the weight of the wound. We'll talk about the mother and separating from the wounded mother and what that means. What does that look like? We all have a mother. And so what does that look like as women? And then weaving our words, women as storytellers, understanding the power of our words, the power of us as alchemists, that we really do create a lot more than we think, and our words carry power, and we carry the stories of our families, of ourselves, and the stories that we are weaving about not only ourselves, but about each other. Then we move to the second trimester, which is the health. And in the health, we'll address and analyzing the breach in the relationship. So that includes feeding the hungry ghost, our looking at our shared trauma, the deadly silence, and that's living in the bubble. Everybody's living in a bubble, but what bubble are you in? And how does that bubble pose a detriment to you and to those around you being in that bubble? We'll also talk about power and power in all of its variations. So we'll talk about violence, and we'll talk about silence. We'll talk about proximity to power, and everything in between. But we have to address power as women, and just as women, and in all of the variations of how it shows up culturally as well. And then we move into the third trimester, the healing. And the healing will address, and that's really laboring through the plane of reconciliation. This is deeper work where we get to really, we've got to labor through. So it can get a little bit intense during this phase of it, but by then we've created this safe space, and we also are closer to understanding and seeing a newness within each other. So part of the topics for that will be all of my relations, healing our ancestral roots, and then seeking and understanding a pathway to empowerment through our archetypal energy. We all have archetypal energy in our collective consciousness, and understanding how those archetypes show up individually, but also collectively, and how can we heal? How can we use that to our good? And then breaking the silence, understanding that there are a lot of things that as women we have been trained to be silent about, breaking that silence within ourselves. And how do we break forth and find our woman voice? And what does that look like? And through that, we move to birth, the hope. These are seeds. And so in that hope, we're planting the seeds of restoration, reclamation, and release. And so we'll be compressing decades into days. We'll be telling our story through a different lens and understanding how to do that. We'll be reclaiming our uncivilized selves. You know, we talk about our colonized mind and all of that. Well, we need to reclaim that uncivilized self, that part, that our divine essence, that part of us that came here and knew exactly what we came here to do. And so we're going to reclaim it in a way that probably you don't expect. And so we'll also talk about courageous vulnerability, and then the house that women built. By this time, we can we've unleashed our uncivilized self, and we can now imagine and envision, but also proactively create the world in which we want to live in. And so what does that look like when we are fully empowered and our hearts are activated in a way that is not in opposition to each other, that as women, we are a united front? What can we build together? And so that is in essence the heart of birth. Just to give you an overview, quick overview of our cohorts. Again, phase 1 is the pregnancy, and that will be 9 months. And our first cohort begins Wednesday, September 13th, and it will end Wednesday, May 15th of 2024. We're literally going through 9 months, and it's 18 sessions. Phase 2 is active labor, our birth journey, and that's that 4-day retreat that we will, depending on the cohort, will be decided when and where, so that it is accessible to all the women that are part of that cohort. And then phase 3, postpartum, which is our online private community, where we will continue deepen our exploration around racism, sex, violence, spirituality, activism, femininity, and our relationship, of course, with one another as women. The first cohort, again, begins September 13th. The total investment for the 9 months is $2,700. Now, that's for 18 virtual sessions That's about $150 per session. Why are the cohorts $150? That is a sacred number, 150. And it often appears when you're trying to make important decisions, and that will affect your future. And it helps you to focus on goals and to trust that the universe will provide. I wanted to create something where there is an exchange, because I know that when people invest, they're more inclined to do it when you've got some skin in the game. I know I have gone through I've invested thousands of dollars for online courses and those kinds of things. And most of them I don't finish. And part of it is because it's usually a webinar and it's a course outline, but there's no accountability. There's no, there may be a Facebook group that you can tap into and have kind of a global community in that way, and maybe a Zoom every now and then that's attended by hundreds of people. Well, I wanted a different model because I think in order to create a safe space for people to do the work, I'm more interested in creating quality than quantity. And so these cohorts are small groups of women, no more than 15, 20 at the max, that will be in each of the cohorts. And the reason for that is by design, that I didn't want it to be something that I want women to really be together. So in order to do that, these first cohorts, these first 3 cohorts, instead, in lieu of, if you don't have the $2,700, if you have it, that would be great. I appreciate you, love you the most. If you could sponsor a woman in addition to yourself, or if you don't want to come, but you know that someone this would resonate with, you could sponsor her. But if you don't have $2,700, what I wanted was to create an opportunity. I did not want money to be the reason that anybody could not participate. And so in lieu of the full tuition, through these first 3 cohorts, we're offering that any woman that wants to attend, and this is a first serve basis, because we have limited enrollment. We're only doing, again, a small group of women. We will accept a heart-centered donation. And what I say by heart-centered donation is that you know the cost of it, but you also know your finances. And so if you gave something that is heart-centered, it will be just as valuable. If you're just trying to be cheap, that ain't a heart-centered, that's a fear-based donation. What we want is a heart-centered donation. And so we leave that up to your discretion. And if we have the space, we certainly want you to be a part of it, and we don't want to turn anyone away because of the money. Our first cohort, we've decided to expand it. And so we have 3 cohorts. Our first cohort begins Wednesday, September 13th, and it will end on a Wednesday. So each cohort, right now, technically, we started on, it will be the same day of the week. And the only reason that it will change is if the women within the cohort decide, instead of 8 o'clock, we need to be at 9 o'clock or 7:30 or whatever. So that would be a change that would be negotiated within the cohort. But the first cohort will begin on Wednesday, September 13th, and it will end on Wednesday, May 15th. The second cohort will begin on Sunday, October 22nd, and it will end on Sunday, June 16th. And the times and specifics of each of these are on our website. So if you're interested in any of these 3 options, you can go on our website and get more information as far as the specifics of times. The third cohort will begin on Thursday, January 11th of 2024, and will end on October 24th of 2024. And please note that there will be no sessions in the month of July of 2024. I told y'all earlier that my Camp Butterfly 20th reunion is in the month of July. We are celebrating all month for Camp Butterfly, Project Butterfly. There's a whole plethora of stuff that I will be completely distracted in July of 2024 because of Project Butterfly and Camp Butterfly. So I'm not going to even fool myself and pretend like I will be able to do both of these things at the same time. So July is a free month, and so then that will extend us to October of 2024 for that third cohort. So if you are interested, the way this process works is it's because we want to make sure that we have just the right amount of women and just the right combination. The first thing you do after you watch this presentation is to go to our website, birthcohorts.org, and fill out our preliminary registration on our website. Once we receive your preliminary registration, and if there's still room in the cohort that you are desirous of, we will send you the payment portal, and then you can either pay the full tuition or your Heart Center donation. And then once you're in the cohort, we will send you a link to the cohort sessions, as well as the invitation to join our Wisdom Collective, which is our online sacred community. So, and you will be able to join that starting on whichever day whichever cohort you join or are a part of. So if you're in that first cohort, September 13th, you can not only get the Zoom, but you'll also be a part of our Wisdom Circle as well. So again, this is our website, and I just want to say thank you for staying with me through this, but I wanted to give you kind of the full idea of it, and I hope that you will join us in one of our cohorts. We'll have more as we go on, but this is kind of our inaugural, so we want to make it as easy as possible. The women that are, you know how in the beginning you just get all the bells and whistles and everything and then some. Our hope is that we will be able to continue this, and this is my second assignment. You know, my first was Project Butterfly, Camp Butterfly, and now I'm being reassigned, and I know that this will grow as more and more women participate and hopefully be inspired, and will help birth cohorts all across the planet, because I think that it's time for women to stand in their power, but understanding what that power is, and how we can birth a new world if we're activated in relationship to one another in a way that we have never been activated before. So I'm really excited to be a part of it. I look forward to working with you, and please feel free to share this video with anyone you think that this resonates with. And I would encourage you to join us as soon as possible, because our cohorts, again, are very limited in size. And I just look forward to being with you and supporting you, and just birthing a new world. All right. So thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you soon.